You should not be here, human. The voice was weak but sharp, cutting through the thick smoke like a blade. Ethan coughed, ignoring the stinging heat against his skin. The wreckage of the burning ship groaned above him, metal screaming as it buckled under the relentless fire. But none of that mattered. Not now. Not when he was staring at the girl chained to the wall, her iridescent skin glinting beneath the flickering light of the flames. She wasn't human. Big, violet eyes locked onto his, filled with something between wariness and disbelief. Her wrists were bound with thick, rusted shackles, and her breathing was shallow. She was barely conscious, yet still, she tried to straighten her back as if defying her fate. Ethan cursed under his breath. He hadn't planned for this. All he wanted was to get off this damn rock with his next shipment of minerals and keep his head down. No trouble, no complications. But now he was standing in the belly of a burning slave ship, about to do something incredibly stupid. "Come on," he muttered, stepping closer. "We don't have time for this." The ship shuddered violently, a deafening explosion rattling through the hull. A warning. This thing was about to go down for good. The girl didn't move. "You don't understand," she rasped. "If you take me from here, they will come for you." "Yeah." Ethan gritted his teeth, raising his blaster and shooting clean through the chains. "Let him try." She collapsed forward, too weak to stand. Without thinking, he scooped her up into his arms and bolted toward the exit, just as the entire ship erupted behind them in a monstrous ball of fire. He didn't look back, because something told him that saving her wasn't the hard part. It was surviving what came next. Ethan's lungs burned as he sprinted through the chaos, the alien girl limp in his arms. The ground quaked beneath his boots as debris rained down from the sky, glowing embers lighting up the night like dying stars. Behind him, the remains of the slave ship crumbled into a molten heap, a thick plume of black smoke curling into the sky. He didn't stop running. Not until he reached the rocky ridge overlooking the crash site, where his hoverbike was stashed. Only then did he dare to glance back. The ship was gone. Nothing but smoldering wreckage remained. Ethan exhaled, adjusting his grip on the girl. Up close, she was even stranger. Her violet eyes were half-lidded, her skin shifting between shades of deep blue and silver, as though reacting to the firelight. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and uneven. "Hey!" He nudged her lightly. "Still with me?" Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto his with something he couldn't quite place. "Fear? Shock? You?" She whispered. "You should have left me." Ethan let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, well, not really my style." A sound cut through the air, low and guttural. His spine stiffened. The dunes around the crash site weren't empty anymore. Shadows moved in the distance, figures emerging from the dark. They weren't human. Ethan swore under his breath. "Who are they?" he asked, keeping his voice low. The girl tensed in his arms. "Hunters." Of course they were. Ethan didn't hesitate. He threw one leg over the hoverbike and secured her in front of him. "Hold on," he muttered. Then he hit the throttle. The bike roared to life, kicking up a cloud of dust as it shot forward. The hunters reacted instantly, shouts echoing through the night. A plasma bolt sizzled past Ethan's head, missing him by inches. "Shit." He swerved hard, gripping the handlebars tight as another shot barely grazed the back of the bike. These bastards weren't just chasing them. They were trying to take them down. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The hunters were fast. Too fast. They rode sleek, black speeders, closing the distance with terrifying precision. Their armor gleamed under the twin moons, visors reflecting the firelight. One of them raised a long-barreled weapon. Ethan reacted on instinct. He yanked the bike hard to the left, sending it skidding across the sand just as a crackling energy bolt seared past him. His heart pounded. If they landed a direct hit, they were done for. The girl stirred against him, her voice weak. "They won't stop." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Yeah, I kind of figured that part out." His mind raced. He needed a plan. Fast. The outpost was too far, and the bike wouldn't outrun them forever. He had to lose them. The canyon. A jagged ravine cut through the desert not far from here. If he could reach it, he might be able to shake them in the narrow rock formations. Hang on, he warned. Then he gunned it. The engine whined as he pushed the bike to its limit, the wind howling past his ears. The canyon loomed ahead, its dark mouth yawning open like a beast waiting to swallow them whole. Ethan didn't slow down. He plunged straight in. The moment they entered, the walls closed in, the space growing tighter. It was a risky move. One wrong turn, and they'd crash at full speed. But it also meant the hunters had less room to maneuver. He weaved through the rocky maze, ducking beneath overhangs and skimming past jagged outcrops. The bike's repulsors whined as he twisted and turned, barely avoiding the stone walls. Behind them, the hunters were struggling. One miscalculated a turn and slammed into a boulder, his speeder erupting in flames. Ethan grinned despite himself. That's one down. But the others weren't giving up. The girl suddenly lifted her head, eyes glowing faintly. Turn left. Ethan blinked. What? Left. Something in her voice made him obey without question. He veered sharply, just as a massive rockslide came crashing down where they would have been a second later. Ethan's breath caught. Okay, that was freaky. She didn't answer. The last two hunters were still on their tail, closing in fast. One pulled out a wicked-looking blade, a crackling energy field surrounding it. Damn it, Ethan muttered. Then the girl moved. Before he could stop her, she twisted around, raising one trembling hand. A pulse of energy rippled through the air. The hunter's bike shuddered, then violently flipped, slamming into the canyon wall with a sickening crunch. Ethan's jaw tightened. You could have mentioned you could do that earlier. She slumped against him, clearly drained. I didn't know if I could. Fantastic. Now there was only one left. The final hunter pulled something from his belt. Not a gun. Not a blade. Something worse. A beacon. He activated it. Ethan's stomach dropped. A bright red flare shot into the sky, pulsing like a warning bell. The girl inhaled sharply. No. Ethan didn't need to ask why she sounded terrified. That beacon wasn't just a signal. It was a message. And whoever was listening was already on their way. Ethan clenched his jaw, pushing the bike harder. The canyon walls finally opened up into a wide plateau, giving them a clear path ahead. The last hunter was right on them, but Ethan had an idea. Brace yourself, he warned. Then, at the last second, he cut the repulsors. The hoverbike dropped like a stone. The hunter, too close to react, overshot them, slamming straight into a low-hanging rock formation at full speed. The explosion lit up the night. Ethan barely managed to get the bike stable again before they hit the ground. His breath was ragged, his hands shaking. They had made it. But the girl wasn't celebrating. Her entire body was tense, her glowing eyes locked on the sky. Ethan followed her gaze. His stomach turned to ice. Above them, the sky was no longer empty. Dark ships descended through the clouds, their sleek forms blocking out the stars. A fleet, and they were coming for her. Ethan exhaled sharply, gripping the handlebars. Well shit. The girl turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. They found me. Ethan's fingers tightened around the handlebars. His heart pounded against his ribs as he watched the fleet descend. There were at least a dozen ships, their black hulls gleaming under the twin moons. They moved in perfect formation, silent, predatory. His gut twisted. These weren't just slavers. This was something worse. The girl, whoever she was valuable enough to warrant an entire damn armada. Ethan, her voice was barely a whisper, but he heard the fear in it. Yeah, he muttered, forcing himself to think. I see him. The hoverbike rumbled beneath them, its power core humming as he eased it forward. Running wasn't an option. Not this time. He needed a plan. Fast. The ships hovered above the plateau, scanning the ground below. A few broke formation, angling toward them. From their underbellies, smaller crafts detached, sleek black interceptors built for speed and capture. Ethan swore under his breath. They know exactly where we are, the girl murmured. Yeah, he muttered. Figured as much. She turned to him, her violet eyes locking onto his. I told you they would come. Ethan scoffed, gripping the throttle. What can I say? I'm an optimist. The first interceptor roared toward them, its engines shrieking. A warning. Surrender. Ethan's gut told him they weren't here to negotiate. They won't let you live, she said suddenly. Not after what you did. He exhaled. Yeah, I kinda got that impression. The lead ship fired a warning shot. A thin arc of plasma sizzled past them, scorching the ground just inches away. Get off the bike, Ethan ordered. The girl hesitated. What? Now? She barely had time to react before he killed the repulsors again, sending the hoverbike into a skidding halt. The second they hit the ground, Ethan grabbed her hand and yanked her into the nearest rock formation. A split second later, the bike exploded. The interceptors pulled back slightly, caught off guard. But Ethan knew it wouldn't last. Where do we go? She asked, pressing against the rock. Ethan's mind raced. Down. He pointed to a narrow fissure in the stone, barely visible in the darkness. A cave system runs under this plateau, he said. If we can get inside, we might lose them in the tunnels. She didn't argue. They ran. Behind them, the ships adjusted their positions, scanning for movement. A bright spotlight swept across the terrain, missing them by inches as they slipped into the fissure. Darkness swallowed them whole. The air inside the cave was damp and stale, the walls slick with moisture. Ethan moved quickly, keeping his grip on the girl's wrist as they navigated deeper into the tunnels. They won't stop, she whispered. They never stop. Ethan shot her a look. You want to tell me who exactly they are? She hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. The Valari Dominion. Ethan frowned. He'd heard that name before. Whispers in the deepest corners of the galaxy. Rumors about an empire that operated in the shadows. A civilization so advanced, so secretive, that few had ever seen them and lived to talk about it. He exhaled sharply. Great. So I pissed off the most powerful people in the quadrant. She gave him a strange look. You don't understand. They aren't just powerful. They control entire star systems. They command armies. They don't ask. They take. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, well, they're not taking you. Her expression flickered, something unreadable passing over her features. You don't get it, she murmured. I'm not just some runaway. She hesitated. Ethan stopped walking. You're what? She took a breath, her glowing eyes locking onto his. I am Seris Vale. The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it, the way her voice trembled slightly, told him everything. She wasn't just anyone. She was royalty. Ethan exhaled slowly. You're a princess. She flinched, as if the word physically hurt her. A fugitive. He shook his head. No, princess. If they sent a whole damn fleet after you, you're a hell of a lot more than that. She didn't argue. Ethan rubbed his temples. This just kept getting better. He'd spent years staying out of trouble, avoiding the eyes of the big players in the galaxy. Now, in the span of a few hours, he had managed to piss off an empire and steal their princess. Fantastic. A low rumble echoed through the tunnels. Seris tensed. They're coming. Ethan swore under his breath. He wasn't sure how, but they were tracking her. Why are they after you? He asked, moving deeper into the cave. What's so important that they'd send an entire fleet just to bring you back? Seris hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, I am the last heir to the Valari throne. Ethan stopped walking. Wait, he said slowly. You mean if something happens to you? She swallowed hard. The Dominion falls. A heavy silence stretched between them. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Oh, well, no pressure or anything. Seris gave a humorless smile. You should have left me in the fire. Not really my style, Ethan muttered. The rumbling grew louder. Ethan clenched his jaw. He didn't know how, but the Dominion was getting closer. And if they caught them, there was no fighting their way out. His grip tightened around his blaster. All right, princess, he muttered. Let's make sure you stay lost. Then they ran. Ethan didn't look back. He didn't have to. The rumbling in the tunnels was growing louder, a deep, guttural vibration that sent dust and pebbles trickling from the ceiling. They were coming. Seris moved beside him, her breathing steady despite the urgency. She was weak, still recovering, but there was something else in her movements now. Purpose. They ran deeper into the tunnels, the walls narrowing around them. The rocky passage twisted and turned, lit only by the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. Ethan's mind raced. If the Dominion had a lock on Seris, they wouldn't stop hunting her. Hiding wouldn't be enough. He needed a way to shake them for good. "Any chance you've got some royal tricks up your sleeve?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Seris didn't answer right away. Then, after a pause, she said, "There is one way." Ethan glanced at her. "Why do I feel like I'm not gonna like it?" She hesitated. "If I bond with you, fully, officially, they won't be able to take me by force." He nearly tripped. "Bond?" Seris gave him a sideways look, the faintest hint of amusement flashing in her violet eyes. "It's an ancient right among my people. A binding contract. It would mark you as my protector." Ethan let out a short laugh. "Yeah, see, that sounds a lot like marriage, and I don't do commitment." She ignored him. "If I am bound to you, the Dominion cannot reclaim me. By our own laws, I would be beyond their reach." Ethan frowned. "And if we don't do this whole bonding thing? They will kill you." Well, that was convincing. The rumbling grew into a roar. A gust of hot air blasted through the tunnels as something massive pushed into the narrow passage behind them. Ethan caught a glimpse of gleaming black armor, the eerie glow of a scanning drone, and the unmistakable silhouette of a Dominion hunter. "Talk later," he gritted out. "Run now." Seris didn't argue. They pushed forward, dodging low-hanging rocks, their shadows flickering against the walls as the glow of the drones behind them grew brighter. Then, up ahead, the tunnel split. Ethan skidded to a stop, cursing under his breath. Two paths. One led deeper into the caves. The other? He had no damn clue. Seris hesitated for only a second before pointing to the right. "This way." Ethan didn't question her. He followed, gripping his blaster tight as they barreled down the narrowing passage. Behind them, the Dominion soldiers hesitated at the split. Then, as if sensing something, they followed. Ethan swore. "They're tracking you, Princess." Seris exhaled sharply. "I know." The tunnel began sloping downward, the air turning thick and humid. The walls glistened with moisture, and a deep, steady thrumming filled the space around them. Ethan felt it in his bones. "What is this place?" he asked. Seris didn't answer. She only pressed forward, urgency written all over her face. And then the tunnel opened into a vast, underground cavern. Ethan slowed, his breath catching. The space was enormous, stretching so far he couldn't see where it ended. Massive stone pillars jutted from the ground like ancient teeth, and at the center of the cavern, a pool of shimmering blue liquid pulsed with light. Seris stopped at the edge of the pool, her expression unreadable. Ethan frowned. "Princess, now really isn't the time for a swim." "This is an Alaris pool," she interrupted. "A place of power." Ethan glanced over his shoulder. The Dominion soldiers were closing in. They had maybe a minute before the hunters reached them. He turned back to Seris. "Unless this place of power can vaporize an entire army, I suggest we keep moving." Seris took a deep breath. Then she stepped into the water. Ethan cursed. "Oh, come on." The moment her feet touched the glowing pool, the entire cavern came to life. The water pulsed, sending waves of energy rippling outward. The air crackled, and Seris changed. A faint glow surrounded her, her silver-blue skin shimmering like starlight. Her eyes brightened, locking onto his with an intensity that made his pulse jump. "The bond," she said softly. "It has to be now." Ethan hesitated. The hunters were almost there. Seris reached for him. "Trust me." He didn't know why he did, but he stepped forward. The moment his hand met hers, a surge of energy tore through him. The cavern exploded with light, and everything changed. Ethan barely had time to react before a surge of energy slammed through his entire being. It was like standing at the heart of a star, blinding, searing, and impossibly vast. His vision blurred, his body weightless as the world around him twisted. Somewhere in the distance, he heard Seris's voice. "Don't fight it." He wasn't sure if she spoke out loud or if the words echoed in his mind. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Ethan staggered back, gasping. His body tingled, his senses razor-sharp. The cave seemed clearer somehow, every sound, every movement, amplified in a way that wasn't natural. "What the hell just happened?" he muttered. Seris exhaled slowly, her glowing eyes locked onto his. "The bond is complete." Ethan frowned. "I don't feel bonded." Seris gave him a knowing look. "Look again." Ethan glanced down, and his stomach clenched. A mark now burned on the inside of his forearm, pulsing with faint golden light. It wasn't ink or a scar, but something deeper, something that felt like it had rewritten his very essence. His mind raced. He wasn't just some guy who saved an alien girl anymore. He was something more. A protector, a guardian. And as the realization sank in, so did something else. An overwhelming wave of certainty. Seris was his to protect. Not because of duty, not because of some ancient law, but because it felt right. The Dominion hunters reached the mouth of the cavern. The first one, a massive figure clad in black armor, raised a weapon. Ethan didn't think. He moved, faster than he ever had before. One moment he was standing beside Seris. The next, he was in front of her, his blaster already firing. The Dominion soldier barely had time to react before Ethan's shot blasted him backward. Another rushed forward, but Ethan was already there, ducking low, spinning, landing a solid punch to the soldier's midsection. The force sent the Dominion warrior flying into the cavern wall. Ethan froze. He was strong, faster, more precise. Whatever Seris had done to him, it had changed everything. Seris stepped forward, her gaze sharp. "The bond grants power to the protector. Your instincts will guide you now." Ethan grinned. "You should have mentioned that part earlier." The remaining Dominion soldiers hesitated. This wasn't what they'd expected. Ethan could feel their uncertainty, could sense their fear. And then, a deep, echoing voice filled the cavern. "Enough." Ethan turned sharply. A tall, imposing figure stepped through the ranks of soldiers. He was different from the rest. His armor sleeker, his presence suffocating. The others stepped aside as he approached, their heads lowering in deference. Seris stiffened. "Talix." Ethan tightened his grip on his blaster. "I take it this guy's important?" Seris's jaw clenched. "He is the Dominion's High Commander." Talix stopped a few paces away, his piercing silver eyes locking onto Seris. "You should not have run." Seris lifted her chin. "I will never return." Talix studied her for a long moment, then turned his gaze to Ethan. "You do not understand what you have done, human." His voice was calm, but there was a quiet menace beneath it. "By invoking the bond, you have declared war on the Dominion itself." Ethan smirked. "Yeah? Well, considering you guys were gonna kill me anyway, I figured I might as well go all in." Talix's expression didn't change. "You are outnumbered. Outmatched." Ethan rolled his shoulders. "You sure about that?" The energy from the bond still thrummed through his veins. He had never felt more alive, more capable. And with Seris beside him, something told him he wasn't alone in this fight. Seris stepped closer. "Talix, you know the laws better than anyone. The bond is sacred. If you take me by force, the Dominion's own people will turn against you." Talix's expression darkened. She was right, and he knew it. The Dominion ruled through power, but their traditions were absolute. If the people discovered their leaders had violated an ancient right, their entire rule could crumble. Talix studied Seris for a long moment, his silver eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, he exhaled. "The Dominion does not forget." Ethan tensed, ready for a fight. But instead of attacking, Talix turned and gestured to his soldiers. "Stand down." The warriors hesitated, then obeyed, lowering their weapons. Seris let out a quiet breath. Talix met her gaze one last time. "Enjoy your freedom, princess." Then his eyes flickered to Ethan. "You will not always be there to protect her." Ethan smirked. "Try me." Talix didn't respond. He simply turned, his cape flowing behind him as he strode away. Within moments, the Dominion forces withdrew, their ships lifting into the sky before vanishing into the stars. And just like that, they were gone. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that was anticlimactic. Seris shook her head. "No, that was victory." Ethan turned to her. So what now? You're free, but I doubt they'll just forget about you. She studied him for a moment, something unreadable in her gaze. Then she smiled. You saved me, and now I am yours. Ethan arched a brow. Careful, princess. That almost sounded romantic. She smirked. Not romantic. A promise. Ethan glanced at the mark on his arm, the symbol of the bond. Whatever had happened here tonight, it wasn't over. The Dominion would never stop watching, never stop waiting. But as Seris stepped closer, something told him he didn't have to face it alone. She was his, and he was hers. Together, they turned toward the cave entrance, toward the stars, toward whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan found himself looking forward to the future. The adventure was only just beginning.